Beth White, founder and CEO of MeBeBot, and we've been hosting these series since the beginning of the year. We started out with our first session in January focused on AI governance because there is just such a move right now where companies want to embrace AI within the organizations. However, they may not even have an employee AI usage policy in place. And so if you may have missed that session, Amy can drop the link into the chat of that session as well, and even a template for a free takeaway, which is your own copy of an AI template if you do not have a policy today that helps your company get started. And then in the month of February, we moved on to talking about more of what is the ROI on AI and how do you measure that? And so from that session, we had John Adcock, one of our a leader from, Eventbrite, Care.com, and Retail Me Not, who joined us to talk about how he measured ROI on AI on different initiatives. And we also had a leave behind of an ROI calculator as well. And that is for you all to enjoy and use and try. And then this is part of the series as well called Creating an AI Roadmap That Actually Works. And it really kind of blends that whole kind of concept. First, you have to start with, can people use AI? Then you have to really think about, well, how are we going to measure the success of any initiative? But today we're really going to focus on what does that roadmap look like so that you can actually make sure that you're focusing on projects that are going to give you that return on investment. So as well, and that will lead to a AI clarity framework that will be a takeaway after this session. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. And I think we've got a good group of people here that are attending the session. Mindy, would you like to introduce yourself? Because she's our guest and has been part of this journey with me to create this AI framework that we'll leave you with as a takeaway from this session. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mindy.
such a joy to be here. Thank you, Beth. My name's Mindy Honcoop. I'm based in Austin, Texas, and I've been an HR professional and leader for over 25 years. After I left my last in-house chief people officer role, I started as a fractional HR executive and was able to actually be a customer of MeBeBot. After that fractional role, Beth invited me into being a VP of customer success, which was an opportunity I could not turn down. So it's such a joy to be able to work with the MeBeBot team. And last year, Beth and I started doing AI consulting services. And this framework really was birthed out of that work and working with HR leaders and just, founders and executives and really understanding where their struggles and frustrations are and really in the decision-making process. And so this framework was really to built out of the passion and love to help leaders make a difference.
Absolutely, Mindy. So thank you.
Yeah.
And this is also, I don't know how many of you had read that MIT report that came out last year that said 95% of all projects fail in the area of AI, and many of it was just getting started on pilots, etc. It went around the circles, and I know Amy's got that link and can drop it into the chat. But it kind of was the eye-opening moment that there was a lot of excitement over the years of using AI within workplaces, but getting going on using AI often meant approaching it in many different ways from different companies. So really that report, and along with, like Mindy mentioned, the different types of consulting engagements that we participated on and working with our own customers, we realized that at times people were focused on projects that may not deliver results, and perhaps just even choosing what to automate and what to use AI with is really the first place to start. So, how many of you are using AI within current products that you already purchased and you're just turning on some AI functionality? If you want to just drop in the chat, if that is something you're doing, just put up a thumbs up. And then I know the other big area that people are experimenting and using AI is in the areas of, using the LLM tools like a ChatGPT Claude, Microsoft Copilot, Perplexity, Gemini, for example. So those are other ways that people are leveraging AI. But when it really comes down to thinking about things beyond the world of what's already embedded in solutions you own, and you're doing your own individual projects, but what makes sense for the team? This is where we want to really bring the conversation today and talk about what we're seeing with inside some companies and hopefully leave you with a framework that you and your team can get behind so that you don't become, frankly, part of that statistic of 95% projects that fail, right? And so failure is a very hard word, because what does that really mean? And I also go into things like, did people even give it long enough, right? And other kinds of attributes that make sense to measuring results. But where Mindy and I were going to start the conversation, and I'll turn it over to you, Mindy, as well to talk about this. But we always approach, many of the MeBeBot customers is, when we're talking to potential prospective customers and we're asking them about, hey, why did you give us a call today to learn about our solution that helps automate support and other workflow processes? A lot of it is focused on things that they're already seeing, that they can quantify. Right. So these are things that they're going, gosh, if I were to take an 8-hour day, 10-hour day, whatever you're working these days, and start to journal exactly what I spend time on that's taking, my bandwidth away from other projects or initiatives, what does that really look like? And so when people start to really account for their time, and what they are doing is, especially when they're doing things that are manual processes, or they just know that this is just a very arduous 3-step process. How could you make it quicker and go faster? Maybe there's things you can do that relate to other teams that could help you out, or just other solutions that you could possibly leverage. It really kind of comes down to focusing on this slide, as an example. We're spending 1.8 hours a day, just employees are searching for information in that dreaded company SharePoint or intranet that no one can find information in, or the OneDrive or Confluence, for example. And at times, when the HR teams or IT teams are spending, 30% of their time or day just automating answers to manually answering employee questions, that's a lot of time, that they could shift to other things. And over the period of time and having things that are more undocumented, it really does add up. And so this is just one example of, a way of surfacing a problem that really could be a good fit for AI.
Yeah.
Mindy, do you have comments you'd like to
Yeah,
add?
and I was just gonna say, I was like, some people, this is really like, what is this for you, right? Like, what would this slide be for your organization? How many hours per day would it be? This is often a great place, and those questions that were at the bottom of that slide you're sharing, Beth, are so key. And I often, say, well, am I gonna ask my team to understand this? And I said, this is the time that you want to take to be able to answer these questions, because it is foundational to making sure that we are aligning correctly. It also helps us understand, where is that common shared pain that we all have. And some of the easy ways to be able to do that is, I mentioned, turn on your screen share, like do a Zoom, share your screen just for you and yourself, and talk through your work in a day. Take the transcript from a day, put it into your business approved Copilot or Claude, and have it prompt it to be your expert, and to say, how much time did I take on these tasks? What were some of the areas you would suggest that I have that are manual that could be automated? And this is a great way to then help even be able to automate the very manual task of time tracking to be able to answer the questions on that slide. Some fun
Yeah,
things that we get to do with
absolutely.
our consultant
And I
work.
see some comments in the chat about, that being a very powerful activity. You're
Mhm.
right, Lynn. And, Deb is commenting about, there's a loop problem that, can be really surfaced in some of these
Yeah.
instances. And so, really where we want to take this is again going into the next step. So I'm going to go back to sharing
Yeah.
my screen. So you're going to see us kind of toggle between the screen and our faces. So the next way is, so the next slide is really on, things Mindy and I have seen. And frankly, I've seen with a lot of companies. I mean, we've been working in the AI space at MeBeBot for 8 years now, right? And so there's a lot of different opportunities that companies have had to use AI within their organizations. And at times, it could be the new shiny object, right? And so, for example, if you do not have a framework in place to evaluate areas of opportunity for you all, you may be, frankly, chasing different types of vendor demos that really don't address a problem that you truly have. Or you could be, getting excited about a new functionality one of your vendors is launching within the product you already have, but yet maybe it's not even something that your team has experienced as a pain point, and you go through a whole step of automating something without really knowing what results you want to see at the end. The other area is, talking through, where today do you have low adoption? Are there things that you could do within certain solutions to kind of improve upon that? And then talking about like different things that have been launched and projects that have already been out there today for AI, and are they delivering ROI results, right? And so the more you kind of look at some of the problems that have existed within inside organizations, the more that you may learn that there could be a better way to get started, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I
And
think, oh,
before
sorry.
we go into the, framework piece, Mindy, why don't you share your thoughts? And if others have comments about perhaps, areas where you chased something that didn't quite produce results because it was the new shiny object, or,
Yeah.
another team suggested you take it on before you had really identified it as a problem, feel free to share in the chat.
Yeah. And I think what is echoing with me, Beth, when you don't have a framework, for me, it's the framework helps build that foundational ecosystem thinking that we all have to take a step back and really understand the key stakeholders. Because without it, we often find we're siloed and we have different departments that could start to fight against each other or be running after a bunch of solutions that actually might be similar. So maybe we've now purchased two or three licenses to the same thing. And it's really going back to then, okay, what is our business stance versus what is our siloed stance? And so the framework really does help be able to take that step back as an organization to help bring people together with a common language and around start asking some common questions so we can gather that data that then we can really start to prioritize as a company.
Yeah.
Yes, Lynn,
I
everyone is in such a rush. That is
Yeah. People
such a
are
good point.
in a rush, and it's easy to just turn on something. Like we saw that happen a lot with Microsoft Copilot, right?
Yeah.
Many companies just turned on Copilot. They already had Office 365, and without any introduction to employees, how it works, how their employee information was going to be utilized, how they give feedback if they don't like the results of Microsoft Copilot. There was no circular loop. There was nothing really happening. And so if you turn it on, it doesn't mean it will be adopted, right?
That's right.
And so that's one of the areas that we saw immediately.
Mhm.
And another big area, Mindy, you probably saw this too, is that whole, as people may have heard this term shadow AI, where without having an AI governance policy or employee usage of AI policy, or, any kind of outline in your procurement processes, the next thing you know, employees are using AI and you don't even know about it as an organization, which is also can be very scary.
Yeah, and we also saw, Beth, as a result of that lack of clarity, we also start to see, as humans in a different continuum of whether we're an early adopter and super excited or in uncertainty and overwhelm, we now start to shut down and actually become a little bit of fearful, which may seem like resistance, but there's some underlying emotions. And then it also starts to create a disconnect of conversation because conversation starts to shut down because now we're scared for different reasons, or people may be really excited and they feel further along, and now I feel even further behind, which just doubles down on my emotional fear or whatever is coming up for me. So this framework also in our work also starts to create a level of like, yeah, like where are we at in this journey, and how do we then kind of make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're all together, and what is the clarity of the why are we doing this and how are we going to do it together?
Right, right. And lots of good comments from Shay. These are big initiatives. People do, I know that there were some comments from Lynn about it. It's just we're all in a rush. And then Jim, indicating that sometimes there's a larger gap between, the high performers versus people who are just
Exactly.
kind of getting started. And
Mhm.
so, frankly, that's a whole nother a roundtable on AI literacy, but we'll leave that for another day. All right, well, let's get into the fun part of talking about the actual Clarity framework that we want to introduce you all to today. So, this is just kind of a preview of what it is, but the idea is that without a framework, you lack a lot of structure to have and build a bridge with other types of groups across the organization or even within your own team. And you may tackle projects that are not the right projects that will really solve the types of real problems your team is having that will give you that measurable results that will help you align with metrics and give you some great data and information to share back to the business to show the success, right?
Mhm. Yeah, because it really helps you get that baseline, or if you don't have the baseline, realize you don't, so that you can get it, so you can measure against
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. So just like many companies come up with different types of frameworks with little acronyms, we had to just jump into that as well. So the Clarity Framework is an abbreviation for these, seven
Mhm.
items here. So, and this is going to be your takeaway. We'll, of course, share the slides as well as the link to the recording. Amy also has something she's going to drop into the chat because we do have the AI framework that we're going to do together that you can take away after this session and use it with your own teams. But the first C, and I'll go through the top row, Mindy, how about that? And you can go through
Okay, all
the,
right.
the bottom row. You have to really look about the pain of the problem. Again,
Mhm.
it's really nice to chase shiny objects or to look at something that's already part of a solution you use, but is it really solving a problem that has been surfaced? And if so, how could you quantify it? I'd love to hear if, others have ideas of quantifying pain and problems. A lot of it starts with time, right? How much time is this taking from the team in a manual process? But maybe it's even other intangibles like, you sense employee frustration, for
Mhm.
example, if they have a process that's incredibly arduous. And maybe it's beneath the surface, but it could show up on perhaps some of the attrition reports you're seeing. So there are a lot of different ways, and that was part of what we went through in the ROI calculator is being able to quantify the pain of problems, right? The next piece of the framework is really talking about, again, this kind of goes into the labor intensity, is like if this is a problem, again, like manually supporting employee questions, let's do an exercise and start to actually quantify how many hours per week does this problem touch? Does it just touch the IT team and the service ticketing system? Is it touching payroll as well as benefits, as well as the HR business partners that are more aligned with the individual, departments or teams within your organization? So you want to make sure you can collect some data as far as that's concerned. And then you have to really kind of align what is the experience you want to have? Like, what is that ideal kind of North Star? And how does it align with how you want your whole employee experience to play out with inside your organization? The R attribute is all about readiness. This is where, frankly, I see more companies getting stuck than ever. There's a analysis paralysis where they think we cannot get started with any kind of AI or automation because sometimes they're not always the same. If there is any you know, issues with the data. Yes and no. I mean, we're getting to a point where there's a lot of ways that AI can actually help cleanse data or only access certain parts of data so that you can make a process ready to go while still working on doing the changes that you may need to make to your back end data or how that information is collected, right? So it is one that's probably the most complex right now is this readiness, and we can kind of get into that a little bit more.
Mhm.
Mindy, do you want to take over on the next row?
Yeah, yeah. And I do have one more yes
Yes.
and to the
Oh, okay,
readiness, Beth, is
sure.
really around like in our organization, where's the human readiness? Like being able to
Great
understand where
point.
might that some resistance be, like we're understanding, what might be some of the barriers for adoption. That just adds into, that's true process, people, and technology alignment there. So just a little one yes and the
That is a good
impact.
point, Mindy, for sure.
One of the, and which is why I think it's so important that HR is a part of the conversation. So that in all of these, like if that conversation is happening within your IT team and there isn't a people, function within that conversation, it's so important to get invited or, find out when those meetings are happening and to show up. The impact potential is huge. I think if all of these build on each other as well. So that first row there, the impact potential, we get to know because we figured out what the C, the L, the A, and the R are. That's how we get to actually finally understand what is the true impact potential that it's going to scale for the organization and for those key stakeholders. And so this is yet another element that we want to consider in helping us prioritize and target those few things, right? It's quality over quantity here. The trust and change comfort, that's also something to consider, right? Will your team embrace the change? Is there going to be a lot of resistance, right? It may be high in all the other things, but man, if it's going to be huge to gain trust in this, maybe we're going to, want to consider something else. This will be another aspect to really help us. And I think this one helps us double click into the resistance piece for the employees where the readiness also checks in there. So yet another, I think T just helps hold us accountable to making sure, do we truly understand that? And then why yielding speed? How fast will we see measurable results? I think this often gets missed because when we have the shiny object that we put in, if it doesn't work in a month, oh, let's not do it. But some things actually are going to take longer to understand. Maybe we're not actually going to start to see, like if it's a true like cycle where we're not going to see the impact of that for a quarter, like that's really good to know because maybe that's an activity that only happens once a quarter. Maybe it's not something that happens every day. So we're going to need longer to be able to measure the true impact of that. So that yield is really want to know that. So maybe something daily is going to be better because it's something we're going to be able to learn and be able to iterate on faster. That's something that's only once a quarter.
Absolutely, Mindy. I mean, I know that I, again, was shocked by the 95% of AI projects fail report from MIT because I felt like it was very short-sighted because of this why, right? The yield speed, like only, AI in the way that most companies were embracing it had only really been introduced, in the generative sense for a couple years. And if you look at it, this is a workforce transformation we're going through, and it will take years and years to really see a lot of the results that we will begin and continue to see with AI, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get into this. I probably should give you this little indication
Yeah.
here. So we're
Oh, it's
going to go
good.
to our active workshop exercise where we're going to walk through what this all means. So with each of these elements here, as it says in the bottom, each dimension is scored on a 0 to 2 scale. So 0 means, you're not quite there. This isn't like criticality is not a problem right now. Or 2, it is a major problem. 1 is in the middle, right? And so when we get to adding up the scores, this will help you take a look at each initiative you may be considering and help you decide based on a point-based metric system, which are the types of projects to prioritize over other projects, right? All right, here we go. Let's get started, folks. So, this is again a snapshot of what is contained within the framework that is part of the leave behind for today, where you'll have this framework yourself with the indications of what each dimension is to use on your, within your own organizations. But as an exercise to get started, what we wanted to do is show you how this works. First, we took a scenario. Our example is we have a company that has 500 employees and they're working toward audit deciding is automating IT help desk and HR help desk ticketing, a priority for them, right? And so they brought their, let's say they had brought in the HR, the payroll, the benefits team, and they're all looking together at the problem as a whole, as a not silo group, but together. And they're starting to analyze the results because if the IT team wants to use it, perhaps the HR team and others can use it as well. But they can look at the criticality of the situation. And so when they start to analyze it, they start to think about, okay, how big is this problem? Is this really critical? And it's basically saying they're at max capacity of their staff right now. And so this is one of the pain points that they have to even surface this issue, right? So of course that gets a checkbox in the strong. Labor intensity, if they take a look at the number of people that are manually resolving a lot of the different support questions, it's pretty high in consideration for the rest of the work week and what else that team gets done. Um, and when you look at alignment, perhaps this ended up being more of a partially because there's other issues that the IT team or HR team also has to tackle. And so this needs to get fit within the other priorities. When they look at data ready or readiness, they've got data in a structured way that they can really use that information. And they do feel like it is feasible to start down this path. Mindy, do you want to continue with the couple
Sure.
other three? Sorry,
Yeah.
as we kind
Yeah.
of split this.
No worries. So here, we're looking at this is really going to impact 500 employees plus the IT team every day. I love that the focus here on the number of employees, but also this is talking kind of about that time, right? That it's daily versus quarterly, for example. And so, yes, this makes us very strong. Trust and change. Once again, getting at more of that, making sure how are you looking at the people and the human element here. The IT team is open to AI assist, not full replacement. So, we're kind of midway here, right? Where the trust and change isn't fully all in. We're not all in like, yes, sign me up now. So we're going to mark that as partially. And then yield to speed, the pilot results visible within 6 to 8 weeks. That's really good. It's not, we're going to be able to implement this and see some quick data coming back to see if our hypothesis is correct or not. And so we're going to mark that strong, which gives us that total score of 11 out of 14, which is then a high priority. But maybe if we have like 4 or 5 other projects, maybe one's going to be scored higher on this. Maybe it's going to be a 12 or a 13. And what's great about this is now as a team, as an organization, we can have a better conversation because we have greater transparency into all the different ways in which these projects are going to be able to move us forward or not.
Absolutely. And that's a good explanation, Mindy. So this is how the scorecard works, and we're going to break it in a bit for some questions and just to have it be more interactive. I think we have kind of like what, to take it the next step further, what does structured AI adoption actually deliver? And so this is, again, once you analyze and have the Clarity framework in place, it's also really great to get a visualization, or really more than a visualization, framing what exactly that AI adoption of this initiative would look like to your
Yeah.
organization. This is incredibly key because this is one of
Mm,
the big pieces that we see companies miss often when they may do the clarity framework, they may calculate some initial ROI, but in order to build a business case to get the budget dollars approved for organizations to move forward with certain initiatives, whether it be employees' dedication of time, purchasing additional software, etc. You really need to have to paint a picture for the senior leadership. So this is an incredibly important step to do that needs to get part of this whole process. And again, I think this discussion point right now is, which metrics matter most to your leadership team right now,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like where we want to kind of take a pause and move to, this next slide here. I'll kind of move away for just a moment before we could jump into the exercise, but. Is there anybody inside their organization that, has, experienced these pain points where there's multiple different projects that are happening, or need to happen, and yet no one can decide which one to start first, and you're kind of battling it out a little bit with each other and having a challenge articulating, the problem that you're wanting to solve. Anyone willing to share? We call them high friction points. Or do you feel like there is alignment where your senior leadership, maybe there's some people that will be willing to share this, question that was at the bottom is, do you know what your senior leadership expects of you and your team as far as, AI utilization is concerned and adoption, and what kinds of things are they expecting AI to produce, in the next year or two?
Mhm.
Anyone?
I think there's also, Beth, too, like I think
Oh,
in a lot of this with the, oh, does someone raise their hand? I'd love to hear from someone.
just feel
Okay,
free to
I'll go with it.
unmute.
So
Okay.
sometimes it's not, sometimes it's also a function that what you're asking for is a small project. So when it gets to the larger organization, then it may not rise up to that priority. So it's not that yours isn't a priority and it's not clear. It just there might be another group that's bigger. So maybe how can you piggyback there, learn from that, and then inject those learnings to make so you're kind of lined up next and to make it easier. I need to step away for a moment.
Oh, no, that's a great point. Stacy, I know commented, and with larger organizations, certain groups within the organization, whether it be HR, finance, IT, operations, you may not know what marketing and sales and other groups are submitting. And so ideally, if the whole company can get toward a framework,
Mm,
to analyze all the different initiatives, that could be pretty huge because we know in a lot of operational functions, anything tied to revenue seems to win more, right?
yeah.
As far as
Yeah.
getting the budget and the approvals. Is others have any kind of experiences with that they want to share? I
I see
see.
Jail has her hand raised.
Hey, I was just going to make a comment that, with some of my clients, one of the things I'll talk to them about is, okay, you want to bring in this tool, this AI tool, let's say something like MeBeBot, because, oh, we've got a great business case because it's going to save us these hours and make us more productive. But I almost feel like you need to then counter with, this will enable us to do this, and then really play up, like, now we can take on this initiative that corporate is really wanting to accomplish. This could be our role in this bigger effort, right? But we can do that with this tool. So it's almost like it's not just the savings now, but it's what it enables.
Absolutely. That's a great point, JL. It's all about the opportunity costs, right? What are you missing out on doing today because you're spending time doing X, Y, and Z? And that's also, again, part of the business outcomes piece of it and building that business case. And as Stacy mentioned, you don't know what other teams' business cases are, but I can tell you that a lot of teams are not even sure how to build a business case, right?
Yeah.
So if you at least start with a framework and put some thought into it with your team, I can tell you that at a senior leadership level, your project will be taken more seriously, right?
Hey, Beth, I know that one of the things we've come across similar with the framework with some of the individuals that we work with is, some are even hesitant to just fill it out because they're protecting their space, because they're afraid of the AI taking over and they no longer have a reason for a job. So, what are some of the things that, you've helped to encourage to get the buy-in of these individuals that are in a really place of fear, and what we really need them to complete the framework?
Are you asking me, Mindy, or
Yeah,
the group?
yeah.
Oh,
I just know
okay.
we've seen it so many times, so
Yes,
I know that's
yes.
another
Yeah, I
common.
mean, coming from a place of fear is, making sure people understand that AI doesn't operate on its own, right? There is human involvement in everything that we do in AI. And that showing, this is probably the biggest thing that's missing is what JL talked about is what is the opportunity cost of having more automation here? It means you as an employee get to go do these things. And so I do believe in the world of HR, this is such a huge opportunity for the profession, of people teams is thinking through what will those jobs look like in the future. And if someone was in a role that was perhaps heavily administrative or involved a lot of manual work, what does their role look like 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? I mean, it's a lot. And I think, earlier Lynn commented, no, it's often people just don't take the time to step back and do some planning, right?
Yeah.
Which is often needed. But to get the buy-in from the team to move away from their current processes into doing new things, using, automation and AI, it means pointing them in a direction of what their role will become, right?
And giving them the space to like co-create that and design it,
Absolutely.
Beth. And I love
Yes.
that, because that's what we've seen is we've really had to try and shift the mindset of this is happening to me. I don't have any other say to being able to know, actually, yes, you get to do the clarity framework, but this also opens up the space now to, dream about and build out and co-create, what does your future job look like? Because this, yay, most likely you don't like these things as well.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, start to help them think about, oh my goodness, I actually get to help think about the future. And that, for us, we've seen a lot of people with that mindset shift, because now it puts them out of like, this is happening to me, of, oh, I have some autonomy here. I actually, maybe my voice is, I have the opportunity to dream and to build towards and grow with.
Great points, Mindy. Any other comments? We have,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, as kind of conversation kind of reminds me of, years ago, I started to eliminate the performance review in organizations. And my biggest detractors, quite frankly, was the HR team. Like they were the ones that struggled the most with this. And what I figured out was they didn't know what they were going to do with their time or how they were going to add value, because we quite literally seem to spend 7 months of the year managing and chasing around performance reviews, right? And so they were like, they couldn't figure out what their value was. So
Yeah.
I think we probably also are going to have to develop some kind of framework to your point, Mindy, where it really talks about what what will you do with your time, right? Like how will you continue to add value? Because I often say to them, no, we're going to get to do this exciting strategic things. We're really going to help the business move forward. We're going to be a valued business partner. And it's like they couldn't get their heads wrapped around that and
Mm-hmm.
understand what it looked like. So it's, I think for every department that we're working with and helping them with AI, we've got to have some kind of framework and exercise around how do we expand their minds into what the possibilities are and what they're going to be able to create when they buy back this time.
Great point, Deb. And this may be the next roundtable we do
Right.
is on this
Yeah.
topic
Yeah.
about how to shift people's mindset into what's next. I see Michelle's got her hand up as
Yeah.
well.
Yes, yes. So just a comment. This has been really helpful to me for us to really, my company. So my company is tech. We're 80 people. Pardon me. And I've gotten the go ahead from my executives. They're like, build HR into, I'm sorry, build AI into HR this year. But like, I'm like, that's great because, we use it. Obviously, we use Gemini, we use, our ATS, it's built in there and stuff. But this is helping me kind of really drill down on what that might look like, right? Where is the
Mm.
problem that needs solving? On that. So yeah, just a comment. Thank you.
Oh,
Oh, thank you.
wonderful. Wonderful. Well, that's why, I'll show you the takeaway here in a second. Any other questions or thoughts?
It's, I remember going through search the first time I worked for a startup search engine, semantic search. So
Mm.
that's a whole topic I'm really well versed in. Um,
Mm.
Years ago in 2004. So this has been a long time coming, but it reminds me a lot of when we were taking teams from waterfall to agile
Mm.
and all the fear. But what was a lot behind a lot of that fear is really, do you have a process? Do you have a process? And not only that, but are you using regulations and governance to really strengthen your process? And these things can actually help. I think if people started seeing AI, whatever they want, as a really smart assistant, that could help them stay out of trouble. But it does force you to understand your process and the value proposition because part of the ROI is what is the true cost? How much are we spending on this? What is the real value of it? Are we spending too much money on it? Are we not spending enough? So I don't think it's different than anything else. And just for the other metric, they say even with all these years of project management, that still 70 to 80% of projects either don't come in on time or fail on some metric. So really the gap between that and AI is somewhere between 10 and 20%. That's a much smaller gap if you address it from the same fundamentals of what's missing from, I think someone put it here before, really sitting and going through the whole process first and then building the solution.
Yeah, excellent. Such good, it's so wonderful, Stacy, when you can reflect back, and think about past experiences and Deb, you did the same, things, cycles repeat themselves, right? And what can we learn and how can we get out of those cycles and make even moderate improvements,
Mhm.
right?
There is a question in the chat too, because it's
Okay.
somewhat related but adjacent, Beth, around the difference between an AI tool that helps people feel support versus one that makes them feel watched or replaced. I think we talked
Yes.
about the replaced one, but not the watched or monitored.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the things that is very it's very interesting. I'll tell you a little story. The Department of Labor just launched this new great campaign where they're trying to instill AI readiness. It literally just launched yesterday. And what it is it's a period, it's like you can sign up, you can get through your mobile phone by texting a number, and you can interact with these little micro learnings and you can get information about AI and do some little learnings, micro learnings. And this is the US government, right, that put together this program. I happen to know some of the folks over there, so I became a little vocal in the chat and LinkedIn yesterday to say, if I put where's your privacy policy? I'm giving you my cell phone number right now to interact with you, US government. Do you know who I am? Are you saving my answers to the questions? Are you using my data of my answers to the responses to aggregate to, the overall Department of Labor Bureau statistics. And even the Department of Labor went through this whole exercise of putting that, and they didn't even have that information out there. So how do you build trust with employees just comes from a
Mm.
place of like thinking through, if you want it to be usage and adoption and any of these programs to succeed, you have to kind of think of, I always said, think of the naysayers, think of the people that are always going to be picky. And that's why Stacy's comments about AI governance were
Mhm.
were spot on because you
Yeah.
really do kind of come from that place. Mindy, I'm not sorry, I'm not sure I even answered the question directly, but I kind of went on this tangent because this is my new thing that was just surfaced yesterday, and it was kind of shocking to me, right?
Yeah. Well, I think you're also super passionate about just the ethics around AI. And, one of the first people that helped start a LinkedIn group around ethical AI. And I think it's so important. Yet, when in our hurry, we've talked a lot about hurrying, is one of the things that we need to slow down to also keep in the forefront.
Right, right. I just dropped the link in the chat of the Ethical AI for HR group. Let's just spend one more minute just showing everyone what they get with the
Yeah.
AI Clarity takeaway here. So this is the download that you'll receive from the landing page where, you have a refresher of what those 7 dimensions are and when something is a 0, 1, or 2. You can also see here that you have your own scorecard. So ideally, you have an opportunity to interact and to use this with your team. And so if anything, just be really great. Bring this to your next team meeting and use it as an example and walk through an interactive session to kind of talk about something. Or, I know Michelle, you mentioned you've got an opportunity to tackle some projects. Maybe there's one that you really are excited about personally, but you want to really think it through to see if it's going to be a high priority, high value, right? And then, of course, these are just some examples of what the scores would look like. And then when you are able to, get the results of this, then of course you do have to frame it within side other types of initiatives that are happening and build out that broader business case. I see Jim's got his hand up. Jim, you want to ask your question or? Hope I think he's on mute.
There we go. For some reason, it wasn't unmuting me.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you when you do the chart to see the numbers in each individual section criticality, do the areas where the highest numbers are inform the way that you approach your solution, or is it just to see if you need to have a solution at all?
That's a good question. We came from this as to do you need to tackle this project or not? But in thinking about it in your lens, I don't know. Mindy, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think going through the questions can often, you may thought AI had been like good, or maybe I don't even know what I could do. I mean, I think this exercise could help you even
Mm,
understand, should I even use AI for this or not? Right? I think that it can for either or for both of those. I think it's almost like an incredible way to step through to help someone even find things. Like if they're like, I don't think AI, I have anything for AI. Well, help
mm.
even start to think through these questions. And they're like, oh, actually, because I think a lot of us also forget because we become so into the habit of what we do every day that we lose sight of the things that are just habitually part of our day of work.
Good point.
Yeah.
Thanks.
A good
Great question,
question, Jim,
Jim.
because there's so many questions companies have, and that's where I think people are struggling. They don't know where to begin. Would you all kind of agree with that, that there's a lot of struggles of knowing how to get started? Yeah.
The struggles to
Okay.
get started, and it struggles who to have the conversations with. It seems
Hmm.
natural to have them with IT, but that may not, certainly not the only partner, but it may
Right.
not be the right partner.
Mhm.
Somebody still has to know what your business value is. So they have a high learning curve as well outside of the tool.
Yes. Yes.
Excellent point. And I've talked to a few IT leaders that are now so overwhelmed because it seems like they've become the place that filters all the projects through and they don't even know where to begin. Right. JL had her hand up
Yeah, she
too.
did.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I pulled it back down, but I had a thought and it's left my head. So
That's
my
all right.
apologies. But
We,
I know what I was going to say. So I was giving a workshop a little while back to one of the local through our economic development association, so for small business.
right.
And at one point I had a whole chart about where to use AI, where to use computer number one, how to use the combination of the two. And so when I asked the room, I said, okay, how many of you are using AI in your day-to-day business? Because I'm probably going to guess if you say no, you're not. I bet you are. You just don't know you are. Anyway, the entire room said they weren't using it at all.
Interesting.
And I actually was not prepared for that. I really wasn't prepared for the entire room to say that they have like, it's too big of a thing, it's too complicated, don't know where to begin. So we're just not using it. So it was interesting.
And that's just it is right now the continuum of don't know if I even want to use it to I'm loving it, using it every day. It's much as part of my, processes I do is pretty broad right
Hmm.
now. I think
Yeah.
most of us would agree to that, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
I think part of it too is that our entire school system is panicked about this. So we're teaching even Gen Z right now, this is cheating. It's not always accurate. It hallucinates. Like the stuff that the messages that we're sending people about this is crazy, and something like somebody's got to do something on the nonprofit side. Not you, Beth, you need to make money. But because I think you've got whatever you've got going on here, I want to be able to refer you to some people. But it's we've got to figure that out, because I just had an argument with a Gen Z the other day. I was helping her prepare for the interview, and I said, why are you not using AI to be a thought partner and formulate your answers and all this kind of stuff? And she kind of used this analogy of, well, I wouldn't go to a street magician to get medical advice. And I'm like, what? And
Yeah.
I said, like, it's like, this is, I know, I can see JL like totally laughing with her emoji, but I'm like, where in the world did you get that analogy from? And sure, it makes a mistake. Like last week, I was put something in about somewhere I'm going, and it talked about a storm that it said that was just 4 months from your trip. And I'm like, no, 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 that was 2024. So it's not 4 months. But I said it makes mistakes like that, but it doesn't make mistakes on big things like the theory of how do you frame up the answer to your interview question. Like it's pulling from everything. But I mean, that in itself is, I think, what's even companies like don't use AI because, and I just had another thought, which I'm going to layer on and then I'm going to stop talking, is we're not teaching anybody critical thinking skills, be it
Hmm.
in
That's right.
college or in high school. So when they get an answer, they don't know how to critically assess what's important, somehow we've got to merge these two things together so they aren't just quoting what the AI tool is telling them, but that they're actually critically thinking through what does this apply. And God, I wish I was younger. There's so much work to do, but that's it.
there,
That's all I have to
there,
say.
there is a lot of work, and I'm glad you interjected that, Deb. And I'm gonna go ahead and in the chat to everyone. If you want to get involved in solving this crisis, in a sense of, we are lacking AI literacy across the whole as a society, I've been part of an organization called Austin AI Alliance. And what they do is and believe it or not, many communities are starting their own organizations like this, where they're building in city council members, they're building in the community colleges, the, independent school districts in the area, as well as corporations that are in their local communities. And they're coming together to try to solve, like, how are we going to build more literacy in a safe way so people understand how they can use these types of tools and technologies, because it is going to be part of our futures, right? And so, I mean, I think that, Dallas has a group, New York has a group. There's, I'm sure, several in California. But if, you feel even inspired and there's not one in your community, I guess you could start one. So, um,
There's,
uh, oh,
can I
go
just
ahead.
interject real quick? Because there's one thing as I run into people that are having trouble adopting it, and they're asking me questions about how AI works. One of the most useful responses I've come up with is to just go ask the AI your question about AI. Ask it what its deficiencies are. Tell it not to lie to you. Ask it how it can approach solving a problem if you're not sure what its capabilities are. Anything you would ask me, go ask it and see what it says. And then, most importantly, evaluate how you feel about the answers. Maybe if someone doesn't have critical thinking skills, get them to think about how they feel about each thing that the thing is saying to them as an entry point to being a little bit better at
Bravo.
critical thinking.
Bravo. That's great. Go ahead, Stacy.
Um, so if you all remember back when we started using search engines, we would ask full questions and we were trained just to go to the keywords.
Yeah,
We actually have to go back to that because you will get
exactly.
answers. So you're not going
Yeah,
to get, yes, you have to critically analyze the question, the answer, but first you have to input a fully articulated question. You can actually use AI to help you with that, but that's where it starts with that input. And we have to go back to those long, polite, and concise prompts. And also AI is getting all lumped in. There's LMMs, which are more controlled. There's transfer, there's all different tools, but there's also different databases. Sometimes, they're, scholarly, you're not going to get a particularly wrong answer. You may not, but you still have to know what's in there. So we're lumping a lot of things in there. But I was just thinking in search, they trained us for so long, the keywords, and then you take text where we don't even have vowels anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very retro to go back to
It's
full
it
sentences.
is retro. I love that. I'm gonna drop a link in. This is a company that has a free solution called Prompt Cowboy. Super fun.
Oh
Mindy and
yeah,
I are
love it.
obsessed with it. And it is how to take what they call lazy prompts. It's really helping turn people into just writing something from stream of consciousness into what AI, whether it be Claude, OpenAI, what
Yeah.
have you, needs to really use, and starts to teach you in that way. Jim, to your point too, I think some of the LLMs like Claude, they often, when you subscribe and you pay them money, they kind of give you, some sample questions to ask them about how they work, right? And so I think the ChatGPT and Anthropic and Gemini are still trying to get away with just this blank box, but soon I think they need to help us. They think they were trying to test adoption without saying anything, but more questions are being raised. Well, I can't
Oh,
believe this, but we're
it's
at
already
time.
time. It's
Yes, we're
done.
at time. So just wanted to share one final slide about MeBeBot. So we've been working with some amazing customers for years. We're automating employee support, communications, engagement, even some workflow processes. Please do feel free to reach out if you are interested in our solution or want to talk to us a little bit about some of the consulting projects we do. So we really appreciate everyone being here,
Yeah.
and we look forward to hopefully having you as part of our next roundtable.